I would get asked all the time, what your dad taught you about X, Y, and Z, and we never talked about racing. I ran 159 races and he never came to one.
What happens when a name becomes a battleground? When legacy, love, and loss collide in the public eye, and the truth is buried beneath silence. For years, Dale Earnhardt Jr. stayed quiet about the pain, the rejection, and the bitter conflicts that unfolded behind the scenes of NASCAR's most legendary dynasty. But now, Dale Earnhardt Jr. finally speaks up about his father and stepmom, and it's so much worse than we thought. The silence is broken. In this video, we uncover the untold chapters of Dale Jr.'s fight for identity, the deep emotional scars left by his father's distance, and the chilling power struggle with his stepmother, Teresa. Into the fire. Dale Earnhardt Jr. didn't just arrive into the world of racing. He was thrust into a legacy that burned hotter than the engines roaring on the track. From the moment he was born in 1974, the family name carried weight beyond the ordinary. His father, Dale Earnhardt Sr., was no mere driver. He was the Intimidator, a towering figure in NASCAR history whose presence commanded respect and fear alike. The track wasn't just a place for cars to race. It was a battleground where legends were forged, and young Dale Jr. was born with the roar of engines already in his ears. But being the son of a legend meant something more complicated than just growing up around fast cars and fame. It meant living beneath an immense shadow, where every step was watched, every mistake magnified. The world expected greatness, but inside, it was a harsher reality. Life was fast, often too fast.
No contest. Dale Earnhardt Jr. through 3 laps to go. Here comes Jeff Gordon.
And the noise of engines masked the silence left by absences. His childhood was shaped by speed and discipline, but it was not always filled with the warmth or freedom most children take for granted. The demands of racing were relentless, and the family's personal needs were often sidelined. In this crucible, Dale Jr. learned early that to survive, he needed to master the track, even if that mastery came at the expense of a simpler childhood. The family that drove alone. As a boy, Dale Jr.'s life was punctuated by a fracture that few would understand from the outside: his parents' divorce. Brenda Jackson, his mother, fought fiercely to provide him with a sense of stability amid the chaos of fame and speed. She was a steadying presence, trying to hold on to the pieces of normalcy that racing life so often shattered. But the gravity of his father's world pulled Dale Jr. back into a sphere where family ties were tangled with business deals and public expectations. Dale Sr. remarried Teresa Houston, and with her arrival, the Earnhardt household took on a new shape, less a home filled with shared moments, and more a carefully managed operation centered around racing success. The warmth and casual intimacy many associate with family life were hard to find here. Instead, emotions were guarded, conversations measured, and love often translated into achievement and performance. His sister, Kelly Earnhardt, who stood by Dale Jr. as a confidant and protector, has described the family's dynamic as one where feelings were rarely spoken aloud. Instead, survival meant learning to read between the lines, understanding that in this family, love was shown through grit, resilience, and the ability to perform under pressure. For Dale Jr., growing up meant mastering the art of driving not just on the track, but through the complex terrain of a family that, while united by blood, often felt distant in spirit.
Became my friend or talked to me or showed me any interest, I couldn't help but...
It was a world where every victory was a small triumph over the silence that hovered in the background, a silence shaped by the legacy of a father who was both hero and enigma. The cold engine of legacy. Dale Earnhardt Sr. wasn't just a legend on the racetrack. He was a near-mythic figure whose very presence commanded reverence. To the outside world, he was the Intimidator, fierce, unyielding, and almost untouchable. But beneath that steely exterior lay a man whose emotional vocabulary was limited, especially when it came to his own family. At home, Dale Sr. was not the same charismatic force he was on the asphalt. Instead, he was distant, focused, and seemingly armored against vulnerability. In Dale Jr.'s eyes, his father was a towering figure, a god among mortals who carved out a kingdom at 200 miles per hour. Yet that awe came with an undercurrent of uncertainty and longing. His father's affection was conditional, earned through speed, skill, and victory. There were no soft embraces or warm affirmations waiting at the finish line, only a measured nod, or, more often, silence. The words, "I'm proud of you," were rare treasures, spoken as sparingly as trophies were won. Dale Jr. wrestled privately with a question that haunted many children of greatness. Did his father truly see him as a competitor in his own right, or merely as a shadow to fill? Racing was the language Dale Sr. spoke fluently, and it was the only dialect through which he communicated love. Every curve taken, every risk accepted, every hard-fought lap was a conversation. To win was to earn approval. To fall short was to face the cold reality that love and recognition were not guaranteed. This relentless demand forged a complex bond, one that fueled Dale Jr.'s passion, but also left cracks in his emotional foundation. He idolized his father with a reverence that was almost religious, yet he grew up navigating an emotional wilderness where vulnerability was a weakness, and praise was a prize to be battled for.
Earnhardt Jr., Nadu, Rudd, Gordon Stewart, Dale Jarrett's back in 14th for the
The track was their shared kingdom and battleground, the one place where Dale Jr. felt closest to his father, but it was also the crucible where love was tested, measured, and rationed. Off the track, Dale Sr. remained a man defined by discipline and distance, a man who could conquer racecourses but struggled to bridge the most intimate distances of all. Under Teresa's roof. When Dale Jr. stepped under Teresa Earnhardt's roof, the rules of family and loyalty shifted into a new, unfamiliar gear.
When Dale Earnhardt had his hands on the steering wheel,
Teresa was not the archetypal stepmother of folklore. She did not rule with cruelty or coldness born of disdain. But neither was she a source of warmth or maternal softness. Instead, she approached the Earnhardt family legacy with the precision and strategic mindset of a seasoned CEO managing a high-stakes enterprise. Her stewardship of DEI, the Earnhardt racing empire, was marked by a sharp business acumen and a focus on legacy preservation. Emotions were secondary to control and order. In Teresa's domain, everything had to reflect the grandeur and seriousness of the Earnhardt name. For Dale Jr., this translated into a relationship that was pragmatic, transactional even. Their interactions were marked more by negotiation than nurture, more by professional boundaries than familial closeness. Dale Jr. never once called her mom. The title felt foreign, a role Teresa never invited nor assumed. There were no bedtime stories, no whispered reassurances in the dark, no simple gestures of comfort that a child might long for. Instead, there were expectations, high ones, unyielding ones, that demanded he live up to the standards set not only by his father, but now rigorously enforced under Teresa's watchful eye. In that household, the Earnhardt legacy was like polished chrome, gleaming brilliantly in the spotlight, dazzling and untouchable. But beneath that lustrous surface, it was cold and unyielding. The warmth of family life was sacrificed at the altar of ambition and reputation. Love was measured by performance and adherence to an image meticulously curated for the public gaze. For Dale Jr., the home was a proving ground, not a refuge. His emotional needs were often sidelined in favor of legacy maintenance. Yet even in this environment, a young man forged resilience and determination. The pressure cooker of Teresa's rule may have stifled tenderness, but it also tempered his resolve. In the shadows of a complex family dynamic, Dale Jr. would learn to carve his own path, one lap at a time, racing not just against competitors, but against the expectations and ghosts of those who came before. A glimpse of recognition. For years, Dale Jr. had lived under the shadow of a man who was larger than life, a father who commanded respect not through words, but through sheer presence and the thunderous roar of engines. Growing up, Dale Sr.'s attention was often reserved for the track, the race, the next big win. The boy, despite sharing blood and name, often felt invisible beneath the weight of expectations. But everything shifted the day Dale Jr. took his first victory.
Been around people that did and people that didn't. And
He was just 17, a teenager still learning the unforgiving language of racing. When the checkered flag waved over him, the world seemed to pause. More importantly, His father's gaze did too. Dale Sr. looked at his son not with the distant glance of a parent managing an heir, but with the sharp, measured respect of a seasoned competitor, recognizing a worthy rival, or perhaps a successor. It was like he finally saw me, but not as his boy, not as just family. He saw me as a driver, Dale Jr. would later recall, the memory laced with both pride and bittersweet yearning. That look held a complex mix of approval and challenge, almost as if to say, "You belong here, but the bar is still set high." Yet this validation was a fragile thing. It wasn't wrapped in warm embraces or encouraging words. It was a currency traded in wins and losses, in laps led and races finished. The rare acknowledgement, though electrifying, only deepened the quiet gulf between father and son when the engines cooled. Dale Jr. craved more than mere performance-based recognition. He longed for the kind of unconditional approval that could never be earned in the heat of competition. Off the track, the silence remained, thick, heavy, and persistent. The roar of the crowd faded, but the echo of unmet emotional needs lingered. That fleeting moment of recognition was both a breakthrough and a reminder. In the Earnhardt world, love was measured in victory, and anything less felt like falling short. The day the noise stopped. February 18, 2001, dawned like any other day in the racing world, full of anticipation, adrenaline, and the familiar chaos of engines revving and tires screeching. The Daytona 500 was more than a race. It was a stage where legends were made and remembered. But no one was prepared for what that day would bring. When Dale Sr. crashed on the final lap, the collective breath of millions of fans was held and then shattered. The unthinkable had happened. The man who had defined a generation of racing was gone, right there on the track that had been his kingdom. For Dale Jr., it was more than a headline. It was a gut-wrenching rupture, a seismic shift in the foundation of his world. That final race made it heartbreakingly clear. Dale Sr. wasn't just competing, he was protecting. On that last lap, he stayed back, blocking the charging field so that Michael Waltrip and Dale Jr., both driving for Dale Earnhardt Inc., could break free. It was a selfless move from a father who, in his own way, was showing love the only way he knew how, by clearing the path for his son. But grief in the Earnhardt family was a quiet thing. It wasn't something to be splashed across headlines or broadcast on live television. It was private, contained, and often hidden behind the stoic masks forged through years of hardship and toughness.
When Dale Earnhardt had his hands on the steering wheel, he felt and saw things that you and I will never see.
Teresa Earnhardt stepped firmly into the role of protector and manager, steering the estate and the empire with an iron will. The public saw the strength. Behind closed doors, the family wrestled with a profound loss. Dale Jr. responded by burying his pain under layers of work and relentless expectation. He threw himself into racing with a fierce determination, perhaps to outrun the silence that followed his father's death, or to prove that he could carry the Earnhardt name alone. But beneath every victory and every press conference was a wound that refused to heal, an absence that echoed louder than any engine. The noise had stopped, but the silence was deafening. It wasn't just the end of a life, it was the end of a chapter in Dale Jr.'s identity, leaving him to navigate a path where legacy and loss intertwined in a complicated, unspoken way. The fight over the name. As time stretched on, the cracks between Dale Jr. and DEI, Dale Earnhardt Inc., widened until they were no longer subtle fissures but unmistakable divides. What began as a shared legacy, built on the foundation of his father's legendary career, slowly transformed into a battlefield of control, inheritance, and identity. Dale Jr. wasn't just seeking a symbolic role or ceremonial seat. He wanted equity, ownership, a real say in the empire that bore his bloodline and bore his name. But Teresa Earnhardt, widow of Dale Sr. and CEO of DEI, managed the business with a cold and iron resolve. She held tightly to every decision, every asset, every inch of the Earnhardt brand. And for all his contributions and sacrifice, Dale Jr. found himself locked out of the very machine his father had built.
And as an analyst, right, I want to be reminded by all of the things that a driver goes through, thinks about.
A machine that now ran without him. The contradiction became unbearable. The Earnhardt name was on the building, the race cars, the merchandise. But the son who carried that name was no longer welcome behind the wheel or at the boardroom table. Teresa did not want to give Dale Jr. and his sister Kelly a major share in the company their father had built, despite the fact that Dale Sr. had envisioned DEI as something to pass down to his children. In 2006, she hired Max Siegel as the president of global operations for DEI, and later, Chip Ginn Racing acquired them and rebranded themselves as Earnhardt Ganassi Racing. But their relationship reached its tipping point well before this happened. The tension had already begun surfacing as early as December 2003. In a revealing episode of the Dale Jr. Download, Dale Jr. recalled a moment when things began to unravel. He hadn't been paid in 3 months. When he confronted team executive Ty Norris, he was told to take it up with Teresa and to keep things professional. But the conversation quickly exploded. Dale Jr. shouted, "Y'all haven't paid me?" "You've breached my contract," Norris recalled. It became bitter. "You said what you wanted to say and didn't want to stick around longer." Dale Jr. would finally leave DEI in 2008, but things got worse for the team. The tension came to a head in a moment that many fans still remember with disbelief. Teresa's refusal to allow Dale Jr. to take the number 8 car with him when he left DEI. On the surface, it was just a number. But in racing, numbers are sacred. That 8 wasn't random. It had been Dale Jr.'s identity, tied to his rise, his father's memory, and his personal brand. When Teresa withheld it, she sent a message more brutal than words. "This legacy belongs to me, not to you." But the betrayal didn't end there. Years later, in 2016, long after Dale Jr. had carved out his own path with JR Motorsports, a quiet but shocking legal battle erupted. Dale Jr. filed a trademark application for the right to use his own last name in various business ventures under his personal brand. He wanted to legally protect Earnhardt as part of future media and merchandising projects. Teresa objected, not symbolically, not passively. She filed a formal legal opposition to Dale Jr.'s trademark request. Incredibly, the son of Dale Earnhardt, the man who carried that name from birth, who helped elevate it to modern legend, was now being challenged in federal trademark court by his own stepmother. Teresa claimed that granting Dale Jr. the rights could create confusion in the marketplace, potentially infringing on her control of DEI trademarks. It was more than a legal dispute. It was personal, and it was devastating. Dale Jr. was essentially told, "You don't own your name, not here, not anymore." The court filing became public. Fans were stunned. The same woman who had frozen him out of DEI was now trying to prevent him from using the one thing no legal filing should ever touch, his identity. As the legal filings between Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Teresa Earnhardt became public, a new chapter in their long, tense relationship unfolded, not behind the closed door.